Two, that if the universe has an explanation of its existence, then God exists. And if the universe has an explanation, according to premise 2, that explanation is God. Besides that, premise 2 is very plausible in its own right. For think of what the universe is. All of space and time, all of space-time reality, including all matter and energy. It follows that if the universe has a cause of its existence, that cause must be a non-physical, immaterial being beyond space and time. This is amazing. Now, there are only two sorts of things that can fit that description. Either an abstract object, like a number, or else an unembodied mind. But abstract objects can't cause anything. That's part of what it means to be abstract. The number 7, for example, can't cause any effects. So the cause of the existence of the universe cannot be an abstract object. It must therefore be a transcendent mind, which is what believers understand God to be. So I hope you begin to grasp the power of Leibniz's argument. If successful, it proves the existence of a necessary, uncaused, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal creator of the universe. This is not some ill-conceived flying spaghetti monster, but an ultra-mundane being with many of the properties of the God of traditional theism. This is truly mind-blowing. So what can the atheist say at this point? Well, he has a more radical alternative open to him. He can retrace his steps, withdraw his objection to premise 1, and say instead, yes, the universe does have an explanation of its existence. But that explanation is the universe exists by a necessity of its own nature. For the atheist, the universe could serve as a sort of God substitute which exists necessarily. Now, this would be a very radical step for the atheist to take, and I can't think of any contemporary atheist philosopher who has in fact taken this line. A few years ago at a Philosophy of Time conference at City College in Santa Barbara, California, I thought that Professor Adolf Grünbaum, a vociferous atheistic philosopher of science from the University of Pittsburgh, was flirting with this idea. But when I raised the question from the floor whether he thought that the universe existed necessarily, he was quite indignant at the suggestion. Of course not, he snapped. And he went on to say that the universe just exists without any explanation. The reason why atheists are not eager to embrace this alternative is clear. As we look about the universe, none of the things that make it up, whether stars, planets, galaxies, dust, radiation, or what have you, seems to exist necessarily. They could all fail to exist. Indeed, at some point in the past, when the universe was very dense, none of them did exist. But someone might say, what about the matter of which these things are made? Maybe the matter exists necessarily, and all these things are just different configurations of matter. The problem with this suggestion is that according to the standard model of subatomic physics, matter itself is composed of tiny particles called quarks. The universe just is the collection of all these quarks arranged in different ways. But now the question arises, couldn't a collection of different quarks have existed instead of this one? Does each and every one of these quarks exist necessarily? It seems crazy to say that each and every quark in the universe exists by a necessity of its own nature, so that this is the only collection of quarks that could possibly have existed. Notice what the atheist cannot say at this point. He cannot say that the quarks are just configurations of matter which could have been different, but that the matter of which the quarks are composed exists necessarily. He can't say this because the quarks aren't composed of anything. They just are the basic units of matter. So if a quark doesn't exist, the matter doesn't exist. But it seems obvious that a different collection of quarks could have existed instead of the collection that does in fact exist. But if that were the case, then a different universe would have existed. To see the point, think about your shoes, the ones that you have on right now. Could the shoes that you're wearing have been made of steel? Now, certainly we can imagine that you could have had a pair of steel shoes, the same shape and size as the shoes that you're wearing, but that's not my question. The question is whether the very shoes you're wearing, whether those shoes could have been made of steel. I think the answer is obviously not. They would be a different pair of shoes, not the same pair of shoes that you have on. And the same is true of the universe. A universe made up of different quarks, even if identically arranged as in this universe, would be a different universe. One thinks of the famous case of the indigent man who darned his silk stockings with wool until he finally wound up with a pair of wool stockings. But wool stockings were clearly not identical to the original silk stockings. Now, it might be said that if the man had darned his socks with silk, then the ultimate outcome would have been the same pair of stockings, despite their having none of the matter of the original pair. Or, less controversial, I remain identical over time, despite a complete exchange of the material constituents of my body for new constituents. Analogously, it might be said, universes could be identical across possible worlds, even though they are composed of wholly different collections of quarks. The disanalogy, however, is that the difference across possible worlds is no kind of change at all, for there is no enduring subject which undergoes intrinsic change from one state to another. So it is more like the case of comparing pairs of stockings or human bodies which have no connection with each other whatsoever. My claim here becomes even more obvious when we reflect that it seems entirely possible that the fundamental building blocks of nature could have been substances quite different from quarks, and so characterized by different laws of nature. Even if the basic laws of nature are taken to be broadly logically necessary, it's possible that different laws of nature could have held because substances endowed with different dispositions and capacities than quarks could have existed instead. To think that in such a case we should be dealing with the same universe would be like thinking that a particular pane of glass, say the windshield in your car, could retain its identity if it had been made of steel. This is obviously absurd. No atheist, I think, will be so bold as to suggest that some quarks, though qualitatively identical to ordinary quarks, have the special occult property of being metaphysically necessary. It's all or nothing here. But no one thinks that every quark exists by a necessity of its own nature. It follows that neither does the universe composed of such quarks exist by a necessity of its own nature. Notice that this is the case whether we think of the universe as an object in its own right, just as a block of marble is not identical to a block of the same shape constituted by different marble, or if we think of the universe as an aggregate or group, just as a flock of birds is not identical to a similar flock composed of different birds,